That electric feeling when you witness an athlete break a record, achieve the seemingly impossible, it feels monumental, doesn't it?
It really does.
But that thrill of watching human potential pushed to its limits isn't a modern invention. It stretches back thousands of years to the origin of organized athletic competition, the ancient Olympic Games.
Exactly. And today, we're going to dive right into the fascinating world of those original games.
Yeah.
We've got a rich array of sources, historical accounts, scholarly research that kind of illuminate their journey, from mythical beginnings right up to their profound and lasting influence.
Okay.
Our goal is really to uncover the most crucial and captivating aspects of this ancient tradition for you.
So, listener, our deep dive today is all about understanding the ancient Olympics, getting to the heart of what made them so significant. And we'll try to do it in a way that's, engaging and insightful.
Yeah.
Think of it as gaining a real understanding of a foundational piece of Western culture. Okay, let's kick things off by exploring those legendary beginnings. Where do we start?
Well, the generally accepted birth date of the ancient Olympic Games is 776 BC.
776 BC.
Okay. This is a date largely attributed to Aristotle's historical work, actually, and became the standard in antiquity. The stage for these games was the sanctuary of Olympia, a sacred site dedicated to Zeus.
Right, Zeus, king of the gods. And this wasn't just a one-time thing, it was a recurring spectacle, right?
Precisely. The games were held every 4 years, a period known as an Olympiad.
An Olympiad.
And this 4-year cycle became such a fundamental way of measuring time in ancient Greece that historians would often identify specific years by referencing the victor of the stadion race. That's a short, powerful sprint.
Oh, really? So how would that work?
Imagine someone saying, it happened in the 3rd year of the 18th Olympiad when Laudas of Argos took home the stadion victory. Something like that.
Talk about a claim to fame, being the marker for a whole year. But the Greeks, with their rich tapestry of stories, they also had some incredible myths about how it all began, didn't they?
Absolutely. For the Greeks, embedding the games in mythology gave them deep cultural resonance. It wasn't just sport.
Right.
One captivating story involves the dactyl Heracles. Now, this isn't the more famous son of Zeus, but an earlier figure and his 4 brothers.
Okay.
Legend has it they raised at Olympia to entertain the newborn Zeus, their prize. An olive wreath.
An olive wreath, not gold or anything.
Nope. This simple wreath wasn't just a symbol of victory. It represented a connection to the sacred grove and the gods, emphasizing the honor rather than material reward, especially in these early ideas. This myth also speaks to the 4-year interval, suggesting the games were held roughly every 5th year, counting inclusively, the Greek way.
A family sporting event right from the mythical get-go. What other tales did they spin about the origins?
Well, another significant myth revolves around Pelops, a hero deeply associated with Olympia.
Pelops? Heard of him.
King Ennomus of Pisa had a beautiful daughter, Hippodamia, and a prophecy foretold his death at the hands of her husband.
Oh boy. Classic prophecy setup.
Right. So to prevent this, he challenged every suitor to a dangerous chariot race. Pelops, madly in love with Hippodamia, is said to have bribed the king's charioteer to sabotage Ennomus's chariot.
No way. Sabotage.
That's the story. The king perished, and the victorious Pelops organized grand chariot races at Olympia as both a gesture of thanks and his funeral rites for his defeated rival.
Wow. Okay.
This, the myth claims, was the inspiration for the Olympic Games, and Pelops even lent his name to the entire Peloponnese region.
The Peloponnese, right, named after Pelops.
So you see, even in their origin stories, there's this blend of heroic achievement and, human fallibility, bribery, death.
A bit of intrigue alongside the heroism always makes for a more compelling story. And of course, there's the myth involving the more widely known Heracles, right, the son of Zeus.
Yes. A later myth, popularized by the poet Pindar, attributes the founding of the festival at Olympia to that Heracles, the one renowned for his 12 labors.
Okay.
According to this version, he established the games to honor his father after completing these incredible feats.
Makes sense. A tribute.
These diverse myths, while not always in perfect agreement, they all point to a fundamental belief among the Greeks. The games had profound religious roots.
Right.
That athletic competition was inherently linked to the worship of their gods, and that these events were intended, maybe ideally, to promote peace and harmony within the often fractured Greek world.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the human need to connect even our most physical stuff to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly.
Absolutely fascinating. Now let's move into the historical record. Were there already established athletic traditions in the Mediterranean region before the 776 BC marker?
Well, certainly. The Mediterranean world had a long history of physical pursuits. While maybe not formalized competitions in the Olympic sense, cultures like the Minoans in Crete,
Minoans, yeah.
they had vibrant traditions of bull leaping, tumbling, running, wrestling, boxing, all evident from their surviving art.
Bull.
Yeah, pretty intense. And the Mycenaeans on mainland Greece adopted some of these Minoan activities and also featured chariot racing prominently in their religious and funerary ceremonies.
Okay.
However, the precise thread connecting these earlier practices directly to the later Greek Olympics, it remains somewhat elusive.
It's hard to trace.
It's like trying to trace the very first spark of a flame,
So, like many cultural phenomena, it likely evolved from existing practices. What about Homer's epic poems? The Iliad, the Odyssey, do they offer any insights?
They offer a wealth of information. Composed around 750 BC, so pretty close to that traditional start date.
Right.
While they depict a society from the late Bronze Age, they contain vivid descriptions of athletic contests held to honor the deceased. Funeral games.
Funeral games, yeah.
In the Iliad, we see chariot races, boxing matches, wrestling bouts, foot races, and even contests in fencing, archery, and spear throwing.
Wow, a whole program.
And the Odyssey adds long jump and discus throw to this impressive list. These detailed accounts strongly suggest that athletic competitions were already a significant and valued part of Greek culture, even before the traditionally accepted date of the first Olympics.
So why the specific year of 776 BC then? What makes that year so significant if stuff was happening before?
As we mentioned, Aristotle is the primary source for this dating. And while we can't definitively prove the games began in that exact year,
right,
it's generally accepted that organized athletic festivals at Olympia took root sometime in the 8th century BC. Archaeological discoveries support this general time frame, with evidence of more formalized games emerging around, say, 700 BC.
Okay.
It's also important to remember that the early lists of Olympic victors, the ones before the 6th century BC, are considered unreliable.
Unreliable how? Just gaps or?
Well, potentially reflecting local biases from Elis, the region that actually administered the games. They might have, boosted their own athletes a bit.
A bit of hometown bias, maybe.
It's certainly possible the records served to enhance the prestige of Elis. And despite the romantic image we have, the famous Olympic truce, the ekecheiria.
The truce, yeah, meant to stop wars, right?
Well, it was meant to ensure safe passage for athletes and pilgrims to Olympia. But it didn't always prevent conflicts. It primarily aimed to guarantee safe travel within Greece, but it didn't stop all wars entirely, not even near Olympia itself.
So it wasn't quite the universal ceasefire we might imagine.
No, not really. More like a sacred safe conduct period.
So more of a respected agreement than an unbreakable law in all situations. What about the system of counting years by Olympiads? When did that system come into use?
The development of the Olympiad calendar as a consistent method for counting years. That's a subject of some scholarly debate.
Okay.
The 4th century BC historian Anaphorus is often credited with this innovation, but others, like Hippias of Elos, Eratosthenes, or Timaeus, might have played a role.
So we're not totally sure who started it.
Not definitively. Before this standardized system, Greek city-states largely used their own local dating methods, which, you can imagine, led to considerable chronological confusion.
Yeah, it must have been a mess trying to coordinate history.
Totally. The historian Diodorus Siculus later attempted to anchor the Olympiad calendar by linking it to a solar eclipse that occurred in the 3rd year of the 113th Olympiad, which corresponds to 316 BC.
Okay, using astronomy? Smart.
Based on this, he calculated the first year of the first Olympiad as 765 BC, although modern scholars still hold varying opinions on the precise starting date. It just highlights the challenges of piecing together ancient history, really.
It's always more complex than it initially appears with the ancient world. Now, what kind of athletic events were part of these early games? Was it a big program from the start?
According to later Greek writers like Pausanias, the initial Olympic competition was solely the stadion race.
Just the sprint.
Just the sprint, covering approximately 190 meters. In fact, our modern word stadium is a direct descendant of this event.
Huh. Stadion. Makes sense.
For the first couple of centuries, the Games held primarily regional religious significance, with the majority of athletes hailing from the Peloponnese, that local area. However, as time went on, the Olympics gradually grew in prestige and scope, attracting participants from across the Greek world.
And the Olympics weren't the only major athletic festival in ancient Greece, were they? I feel like I've heard of others.
No, you're right. While the Olympics became the most prestigious, they were part of a larger circuit known as the Panhellenic Games. Panhellenic meaning all Greek.
Right.
This included 4 distinct festivals held on a rotating basis.
Yeah.
The Pythian Games at Delphi.
Delphi, the oracle.
Exactly. The Nemean Games at Nemea and the Isthmian Games near Corinth.
Okay, so a whole circuit.
Yeah. The Olympics, being the oldest of these, held the preeminent position. In fact, the Olympics and the Eleusinian Mysteries, a very ancient and important religious festival, were often considered the 2 central rituals of ancient Greece, sort of representing the physical and spiritual heart of their culture.
Wow, that's central. So who was eligible to compete in these highly esteemed games? Was it an open competition for anyone?
Well, participation was generally restricted to freeborn Greek men.
Okay, freeborn Greek men.
However, it's fascinating to note that women could achieve Olympic victory, albeit indirectly,
How so?
as the owners of chariots in the equestrian events.
Ah, the owner, not the driver.
Exactly. Cyniska of Sparta holds the distinction of being the first woman to be recorded as an Olympic victor in this manner, owning a winning 4-horse chariot team.
Cyniska of Sparta. Interesting. So a loophole, kind of?
You could call it that. It tells us something about the value placed on wealth and patronage in addition to individual athletic prowess, doesn't it?
It really does. An interesting way for women to participate and gain recognition. What about women attending the events as spectators? Was that permitted?
The evidence regarding female attendance is somewhat contradictory and frankly inconclusive.
Ah, what do the sources say?
Some ancient accounts suggest that all women were barred from the sacred precinct of Olympia during the games. Full stop.
Okay.
However, others, notably Pausanias again, indicate that unmarried women, referred to as maidens, were allowed to watch, while married women were restricted maybe to the south side of the Alpheus River, outside the main area.
Different rules for married and unmarried women.
Seems like it, according to that account. What's particularly intriguing is that we don't have specific evidence suggesting women were excluded from attending the other Panhellenic Games, like the Pythian or Isthmian or the Panathenaic Games in Athens.
So maybe it's just an Olympia thing.
It suggests that the exclusion at Olympia, whatever its extent, might have been a specific local rule or tradition. The varying accounts make you wonder about the actual social practices versus, the idealized or perhaps later imposed restrictions.
Yeah, tricky to pin down. So perhaps a unique tradition at Olympia. Now, these games must have carried significant political weight, didn't they? Beyond just sport and religion.
Absolutely. Over time, the games evolved into a crucial political arena for the Greek city-states.
How so?
Well, they served as a platform to assert dominance, to announce and solidify political alliances. Even during periods of conflict, priests would offer sacrifices to the gods for victory in the games, hoping for divine favor in their wider struggles.
Wow, praying for sporting victory as part of war strategy.
Sort of. Furthermore, the Olympics played a vital role in the spread of Hellenistic culture throughout the Mediterranean as Greek colonies were established, bringing with them their traditions and values. The Games became a symbol of shared Greek identity.
Right, a unifying force, in a way. And we often hear about the famous Olympic truce as a cornerstone of peace in ancient Greece. How real was that?
The Olympic truce, or ekecheiria, was indeed intended to ensure the safe passage of athletes and pilgrims traveling to and from Olympia.
Okay.
Special messengers called spondopheroi were dispatched throughout Greece to announce the commencement of the truce.
Spondopheroi. Got it.
While it was generally respected, it's important to remember, as we touched on earlier, that it didn't completely halt all conflicts between city-states.
Right, you mentioned that.
Thucydides, the historian, for instance, recounts an incident during the Peloponnesian War where the Spartans were fined by the Eleans, the administrators of the games, for violating the truce by attacking the city of Lepreum.
They got fined. Did they pay?
They refused, actually, and were banned from the games that year. So while a noble ideal, its effectiveness wasn't absolute. It shows the tension between the ideal and the reality of Greek politics.
So more of a respected understanding than a foolproof guarantee of peace in all circumstances. Were there other ways that politics and the games intertwined, like scandals or anything?
Oh yeah. Political intrigue was certainly a factor. Pausanias recounts the story of Citades. He won the long race, the Dulikos, while representing Crete.
Okay, a Cretan victory.
But at the very next games, he declared himself an Ephesian. He'd apparently been bribed by the people of Ephesus to switch allegiance.
Whoa, like a free agent signing bonus.
Kinda. The Cretans were understandably furious and banished him for this act of betrayal.
Can't blame them.
We also see examples of successful Olympic athletes directly contributing to the expansion of Greek influence. Chionis of Sparta, a celebrated champion in multiple events.
Chionis.
He's said to have aided in the settlement of the Greek colony of Cyrene in North Africa. Victory at Olympia brought immense prestige, not only to the individual but also to their home city. And this prestige could be leveraged in various ways, politically and socially.
It sounds like winning at Olympia was a major badge of honor, both for the athlete and their city. Huge bragging rights. What about the religious aspects beyond the origin myths? How central was that during the actual games?
Oh, incredibly central. The
Yeah.
religious significance was deeply woven into the fabric of the games. They were, first and foremost, a festival in honor of Zeus.
Right.
A grand sacrifice of 100 oxen. A hecatomb was a central ritual performed on the middle day of the games at the great altar of Zeus.
100 oxen. That's a lot.
It was a massive undertaking. The Temple of Zeus at Olympia itself, designed by the architect Liban, was one of the largest and most magnificent Doric temples in all of Greece.
Bigger than the Parthenon.
Different style, but hugely impressive in scale. And inside stood the colossal 42-foot-tall statue of Zeus, crafted from gold and ivory by the renowned sculptor Phidias.
Phidias, the guy who did the Athena Parthenos too.
The very same. This Zeus statue was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Wow. Must have been breathtaking.
As the historian Strabo observed, the temple's enduring glory was directly tied to the prestigious festival and the sacred Olympic Games, which were widely regarded as the greatest games in existence. The whole sanctuary was adorned with countless offerings and dedications from across the Greek world, further underscoring its religious importance.
It sounds like a truly awe-inspiring site, a pilgrimage destination. And it wasn't solely about athletic and religious expression, was it? You mentioned poets earlier. There was also a significant artistic element to the games.
Absolutely. The Olympiad served as a major cultural gathering point. Sculptors, poets, orators, other artists, they would flock to Olympia to display their latest creations. It effectively created an artistic competition alongside the athletic one.
So, like an arts festival combined with a sports festival.
Pretty much. Poets were commissioned by the victors, or their cities, to compose celebratory victory songs, known as eponytions. Pindar is the most famous composer of these.
Eponytions, victory odes.
Exactly. These odes were highly prized and often served as a more lasting form of commemoration than statues or other material honors.
Interesting. The words lasted longer than the bronze.
And it's a fascinating detail that Pierre de Coubertin, the driving force behind the modern Olympic revival.
The founder of the modern games.
Yes. He specifically envisioned the inclusion of artistic competitions, directly inspired by this ancient tradition. And that vision was realized, at least for a time, in the early modern Olympics. They actually awarded medals for painting, sculpture, music, literature.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah. This integration of the arts underscores the holistic ideal of the ancient Greek, valuing both physical and intellectual excellence. Kalos Kadathia, beauty and goodness combined.
That's a wonderful link between the ancient and modern spirit of the games. Now let's delve into the actual athletic events. What kinds of competitions did they feature, and how did the program evolve over time? You said it started with just the stadion.
Right. Beginning with that single stadion race, the event program gradually expanded to include as many as 23 different contests, although any single Olympiad likely featured no more than 20 at one time.
Okay, so it grew quite a bit.
Definitely. Events for younger athletes, like boys' events, were introduced in 632 BC. And our understanding of how these events were performed largely comes from the depictions found on ancient pottery, particularly from the Archaic and Classical periods. Those vase paintings are invaluable.
Right, the black and red figures.
Exactly. Athletes trained in dedicated facilities like the Xystos. Yeah, XYSTOS. It was a covered running track. And the Tetragono, which was an open area used for wrestling and boxing practice.
So proper training grounds. And we often picture these ancient athletes competing in the nude. Was that always the tradition?
Good question. Initially, athletes did wear a loincloth known as the perizoma.
Perizoma, okay.
However, by the late 6th century BC, archaeological evidence and historical accounts indicate that athletes competed in the nude. The Greeks viewed this practice as a distinguishing characteristic, something that set them apart from non-Greeks, who they often called barbarians.
So it became a cultural marker. Any idea why it started?
Pausanias credits Orsippus of Megara, the victor of the stadion race way back in 720 BC, as the first to run naked. The story goes his loincloth slipped off, or maybe he intentionally discarded it and found it gave him an advantage.
Wardrobe malfunction leads to innovation.
Possibly. The historian Thucydides later attributed the widespread adoption of public stripping and the practice of anointing with oil to the Spartans, noting that even in the early Olympic contests, athletes wore belts or loincloths, a practice that had only recently been abandoned in his time, the late 5th century BC.
So the Spartans popularized it. Interesting. It speaks to a changing attitude towards the body and athletic performance.
Definitely.
So a gradual evolution to the iconic image we have today. What about the running events themselves? You mentioned the stadion.
Right, the stadion, about 192 meters. Then the Dalos, or double-stayed race, was introduced in 724 BC.
Dalos, double, so down and back.
Exactly. It's believed that competitors ran in marked lanes, possibly using lime or gypsum to draw lines, turn around individual posts called camptairs, and then race back to the starting line.
Okay, and longer races.
Yes, the delichos, a long-distance race. Accounts of its precise length vary, but it likely ranged between 7.5 and 9 kilometers, maybe 20 or 24 laps of the stadium track.
Wow, that's a serious run.
And the final running event to be added was the hoplitodromos in 520 BC.
Hoplito. Sounds like hoplite.
Exactly. It was a race covering either 1 or 2 dalois, so roughly 400 or 800 meters run by athletes in full military armor, or at least partial armor. Helmet, shield, and initially greaves, though the greaves were later dropped.
Running with a shield and helmet. Why?
It was apparently based on a training tactic used by soldiers, maybe simulating rushing into or out of battle. Imagine the endurance required for that. The weight, the restriction.
Running in full armor must have been incredibly demanding. Whew. Okay, what about the combat sports? Wrestling, boxing.
Wrestling, known as pale, was introduced in 708 BC. Victory was achieved by scoring 3 throws, where a significant part of the opponent's body, the back, hip, or shoulder, touched the ground.
3 throws. Clear objective.
And unlike modern Greco-Roman wrestling, tripping was likely permitted. Made it more dynamic, perhaps.
Okay, and boxing.
Boxing, or pygmachia, was first included in the games in 688 BC, with a boys' boxing competition added later. The rules are traditionally attributed to Onomastus of Smyrna.
Any specific rules we know?
It seems that blows to the body might not have been allowed, or were at least less common than headshots. Interestingly, the Spartans, who initially claimed to have invented boxing, later abandoned it.
Why? Too brutal.
Perhaps they found it, I don't know, not tactically useful, or maybe just preferred other forms of combat training. Early boxers used himantas.
Hamante.
Yeah, basically leather straps wrapped around their hands and wrists for protection. But in later periods, these could be reinforced, sometimes with harder leather or even metal studs, making the sport even more dangerous. The hardamantes.
Ouch. Okay. And then there's the notoriously intense pancration.
The pancration. Introduced in 648 BC. It was indeed a very popular and incredibly demanding event. Essentially a combination of boxing and wrestling, but with fewer rules.
Fewer rules how? Like anything goes.
Almost. Kicks, joint locks, chokes were all permitted, even on the ground. Think ancient MMA, kinda.
Wow.
The only explicitly forbidden actions were biting and gouging eyes.
Okay, well, good, they drew the line somewhere.
Surprisingly, despite its ferocity, it was sometimes considered less dangerous than boxing.
How could that be?
Maybe, because you could force a submission on the ground by tap out, whereas in boxing, it often went until knockout. Pindar, the poet we mentioned, wrote numerous odes celebrating pancration victors, highlighting their strength and skill.
Any famous stories?
There's a legendary story involving Eurytion of Phigalia. He was caught in a chokehold but managed to dislocate his opponent's ankle, forcing him to submit. But Eurytion himself died from the choke at the very same moment.
He died.
Yeah. But since his opponent submitted first, Eurytion was declared the posthumous Olympic victor.
Oh my gosh, talk about leaving it all on the field. Literally.
Exactly. A true test of sheer will and physical prowess.
Sounds like it. What about the throwing and jumping events?
The discus throw, or discos, was similar in principle to the modern event. Athletes threw a disc, usually made of stone, iron, but most commonly bronze, based on archaeological finds.
How big were they?
They typically weighed around 2 kilograms, maybe a bit more sometimes, and had a diameter of approximately 21 centimeters. Similar to today's, really.
Okay. And the long jump?
The long jump, or halma, was unique. Athletes used halters.
Halters? Like dumbbells?
Sort of, yeah. Stone or lead weights held in each hand. They swung them forward during the jump, supposedly to increase momentum and distance.
Did it work?
Physics suggests it could have, if timed perfectly. Whether the jump began from a standing start or with a short run-up is debated among scholars, but the evidence seems to lean towards a short run-up being more likely.
Interesting technique. And the pentathlon, that sounds tough.
It was. Introduced in 708 BC, the pentathlon was a grueling competition comprising 5 events.
What were they?
Running, probably the stadion race, long jump, discus throw, javelin throw, and wrestling.
Wow, quite a mix.
It was held over a single day, testing a broad range of athletic skills. But the precise order of the events and the exact method for determining the overall victor, other than knowing wrestling was the final event, remains a subject of scholarly discussion. It was designed to find the best all-around athlete.
A real test of all-around athleticism. And of course, we can't forget the highly prestigious equestrian events, the chariot races.
Absolutely. Horse racing and chariot racing were considered the most prestigious events, largely due to the significant expense involved.
Right, horses are not cheap.
Breeding, training, transporting them. This made these events accessible primarily to the wealthy elite. The 4-horse chariot race, the Tethrippon, was the first equestrian event introduced in 680 BC.
4 horses, that's horsepower.
Then came the horse race with a rider, the Keels, in 648 BC. And importantly, riders competed without saddles or stirrups.
Bareback, at speed. Takes skill.
Immense skill. The 2-horse chariot race, the Cinerus, was added later in 408 BC. There were also brief appearances of races for mule carts, the Epane, and a mare horse race called the Calpe, but these were later discontinued. Maybe not glamorous enough.
Mule cart racing, okay.
And crucially, as we mentioned with Cynisca, the victor in the equestrian events was not the rider or the charioteer, but the owner of the horses.
Right, which allowed women to win.
Exactly. And wealthy individuals like Alcibiades, the Athenian politician in general, could even enter multiple teams. He famously entered 7 chariots in one race and won first, second, and fourth place.
7 chariots. Talk about hedging your bets.
And then there's the somewhat comical account of Emperor Nero.
Oh, Nero again. What did he do?
He competed in a special 10-horse chariot race he introduced. He famously fell out of his chariot during the race, but was still declared the winner by the judges.
You're kidding. Just because he was the emperor.
Presumably. Goes to show how politics could override sport sometimes.
Leave it to Nero to bend the rules. Now, after centuries of such prominence, the ancient Olympics eventually declined. What were the factors that led to their fading away?
It was a gradual process. The Games experienced a decline in popularity and significance following the Roman conquest of Greece in the 2nd century BC.
Roman influence changed things.
It did, though not immediately fatal. There was actually a period of revival under Emperor Augustus, who showed interest in restoring Greek traditions and even subsidized athletic competitions.
Okay, a temporary boost.
But the Games faced renewed decline in the 3rd century AD, a period of crisis in the Roman Empire generally, and the actions of figures like Nero, with his self-serving manipulation of the Olympic program.
Right, the 10-horse chariot race, adding music contests.
Yeah, postponing the Games to suit his schedule, claiming victory in everything, including events he didn't finish that certainly damaged the integrity of the festival. His Neronian Olympiad was even later declared invalid, struck from the records. There was another temporary resurgence in the first half of the 2nd century AD, under the Philhellenic emperors Hadrian and Antoninus Pius. They were great admirers of Greek culture.
So ups and downs.
Exactly. While the official victor lists we have, like the one compiled by Julius Africanus, end around 217 AD, archaeological evidence and other historical sources suggest that athletic competitions at Olympia continued for some time after that.
Oh, like what evidence?
Mentions of boxing winners as late as 369 AD, inscriptions on bronze plaques dedicated by victors dating up to 385 AD, so people were still competing and winning.
So the lists aren't the full story.
Right. The last officially recorded Olympic Games under Emperor Theodosius took place in 393 AD. He was a Christian emperor actively suppressing pagan practices.
Ah, the rise of Christianity played a role.
It certainly contributed to the decline of pagan festivals,
Yeah.
but it's likely that some form of athletic contests persisted at Olympia for a while longer, possibly until the reign of Theodosius II in the early 5th century. Perhaps the final end was brought about by a fire that damaged the Temple of Zeus around 426 AD, or maybe an earthquake later.
So it wasn't a single decree, but a gradual fading over centuries due to political change, religious shifts, and maybe just natural decay or disaster.
That seems to be the most accurate picture. A long, complex process.
Let's circle back to the location itself, Olympia. Can you paint a picture of what it was like during the games? You mentioned it was sacred.
Olympia was nestled in the valley of the Alpheus River in the western Peloponnese, a naturally beautiful setting, quite green. The central sanctuary is known as the Altus.
The Altus.
Yeah, a name derived from a local Alaean word meaning the grove, because the area was originally wooded. It was an irregularly shaped, sacred area containing the most important religious and athletic structures.
Like the temples.
Exactly. The majestic Temple of Hera, which is actually older than the Temple of Zeus, the even grander Temple of Zeus, with Phidias' statue, the Peloponnese, a sacred enclosure dedicated to the hero Pelops,
Pelops again.
and the great altar of Zeus, where the massive sacrifices took place. It wasn't a city, more a collection of temples, treasuries, altars, and athletic facilities like the stadium and hippodrome.
So what was it like when the games were on?
Well, while largely uninhabited outside of the festival during the games, Olympia transformed into a bustling, overcrowded temporary city. It was filled with tents and makeshift accommodations, as there were no permanent facilities for the tens of thousands of spectators.
Tens of thousands. Wow. Must have been chaotic.
Ancient accounts definitely mention the discomforts. The intense summer heat, the dust, the swarms of flies, especially around the altar after the sacrifices. So much so that sacrifices were even made to Zeus Apamios, Zeus the averter of flies, in hopes of relief.
Zeus, the averter of flies. Okay, that's specific.
Over time, especially by the Roman period, improvements were made to the water supply and sanitation to better handle the massive influx of people. Aqueducts, baths.
Some creature comforts eventually.
But even with the inconveniences, as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously remarked, people put up with it all because the sheer magnificence and spectacle of the Olympic Games made it worthwhile. Seeing the statue of Zeus, witnessing the competitions.
It sounds like quite an experience, even with the challenges of the crowds and the insects. Finally, let's highlight some of the legendary athletes who achieved lasting fame at these ancient games. There must have been some superstars.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many remarkable individuals whose names have come down to us in running.
Yeah.
We remember Coroebus of Elis, traditionally recorded as the very first Olympic champion in the stadion race back in 776 BC.
Right.
Or Sippus of Megara, credited as the first to compete nude. And Leonidas of Rhodes, a phenomenal athlete who achieved something incredible. He won 3 different running events, Stadion Dialos, Hoplita Dromos, at 4 consecutive Olympiads. A triastes, they called him. 12 victories in total.
12 olive wreaths. Amazing.
Gionas of Sparta excelled in jumping. Ancient sources credit him with huge, maybe exaggerated leaps in sprinting, winning multiple stadion and dialos races. Asilos of Croton also achieved multiple victories in various running events, though he caused controversy like Satades by switching allegiance from Croton to Syracuse.
Politics again.
Even Alexander I of Macedon, an ancestor of Alexander the Great, competed and won the stadion race, highlighting the prestige of Olympic victory even for royalty.
Okay. What about combat sports?
Orvicino Figelia is celebrated for his dramatic posthumous pancration victory.
The guy who died winning.
Yeah. Milo of Croton achieved legendary status as a 6-time wrestling champion, known for his incredible strength. Stories abound about his feats, like carrying a bull.
Carrying a bull. Okay, maybe legendary is the right word.
Diagoras of Rhodes was a renowned boxer, and his sons and grandsons were also Olympic champions. Pindar wrote an ode celebrating the whole family's success. Diogenes of Thassos was a versatile champion, winning in boxing, pancration, and even the dolichos, the long run, apparently. Over 1,300 victories in various games, supposedly.
Wow. So Stratus of Sicyon was famous or infamous for his unique finger-breaking technique in pancration. Finger-breaking, ouch.
Nicknamed Acrotrocytes, meaning fingertip man. And Varistotes, an Armenian prince, is noted as the last known ancient Olympic boxing victor, sometime in the late 4th century AD.
An Armenian prince winning shows the reach by then.
Indeed. In equestrian events beyond Cynisca, we have Pherenakos, a celebrated racehorse owned by Hiram of Syracuse, immortalized in poetry, and even Roman emperors like Tiberius participated as chariot steerers before becoming emperor.
And Nero, well.
Nero, the self-proclaimed winner.
Right. And let's not forget Herodotus of Megara, who was a 10-time champion in the trumpet competition.
Trumpet competition, was that an official event? Yes. Competitions for heralds and trumpeters were added, mainly to announce events and victors, but winning was prestigious in itself. Herodotus was apparently famous for his lung power.
Huh. Okay, proving athletic prowess wasn't the only skill celebrated. These individuals became heroes in their own right, their victories immortalized in statues and poetry.
Absolutely. They were celebrities of their time.
A truly fascinating collection of individuals. It's clear that the ancient Olympics were far more than just a sporting competition.
Indeed. And their influence spread. Athletics festivals directly modeled on the Olympia Games began to appear throughout the Greek and later Roman world.
Copies.
Yeah, some of which became quite prominent, such as the games held at Antioch in Syria. Inscriptions sometimes even referred to the original festival as Olympia near Pisa, Pisa being the region around Olympia, just to distinguish it from these later imitations. That really emphasizes the enduring legacy and prestige of the original games.
Okay, so to bring our deep dive to a close, we've seen how the ancient Olympic Games had, well, incredibly deep roots in Greek mythology and religious practices.
Absolutely fundamental.
They evolved from simple foot races into this complex program of athletic and equestrian events, becoming a significant stage for political maneuvering and cultural exchange, all while being deeply intertwined with the Greek sense of identity.
A real microcosm of their world.
And while they eventually faded, due to a mix of factors, political shifts, religious changes, maybe just time, their profound impact on Western culture and the enduring human fascination with competitive sport remains undeniable.
Precisely. These ancient games offer us a remarkable insight into the values and practices of ancient Greek society. They illuminate their dedication to physical excellence, that connection between body and mind, their complex relationship with the divine, and their intricate, often messy political landscape. It really makes you appreciate the long history of athletic endeavor.
It really does. And on that note, dear listener, consider this. How do these ancient Olympics, with their unique blend of sport, religion, politics, and art, compare to our modern Olympic Games?
Good question.
What fundamental aspects have transformed, maybe lost, maybe gained? And what core elements, that pursuit of peak performance, that global gathering of nations, that sheer spectacle have somehow endured across the vast expanse of millennia?
What's the same? What's different?
It's a fascinating question to ponder and perhaps the subject of a future deep dive.